to talk about how the waves of feminism affected fairy tales. And so this paper that I wrote is called The Waves of Female Fairyism, and my name's Lauren Reeder. This is just a brief overview of what I'm going to talk about today. First, I'm going to talk about how fairy tales have been changed based on these waves of feminism, and then I'm going to talk about the pre-wave of feminism, and then the three waves of feminism and how different fairy tales and the different time periods were affected by them, and then I'll conclude. So fairy tales, they were changed. Fairy tales had to be transformed and adapted due to the influence of feminism, typically resulting in these characters being changed from being beautiful to actually being role models. So the first wave of feminism is actually before feminism happened. So during this time, many women were considered being submissive and the weaker gender. And so typically women were seen as property or objects, an accessory to a man or an inconvenience. So typically there was always a dowry involved in these times. Many women were typically married off, one, because a man found her very beautiful, or two, so a family could gain an alliance or gain social standings. And so two of the fairy tales I'm going to talk about during this time period is Little Red Riding Hood and Donkey Skin. So Little Red Riding Hood, we all know Little Red Riding Hood, the little girl with the hood, it's eaten by the wolf, so on and so forth. In this, it describes that she wears this red cloak because she's a very sexual object, she's very beautiful. One of the quotes from the book itself is Little Red Riding Hood is the prettiest you can imagine, and the red hood suits her well as a child. And with this, the prettiest shows that it doesn't matter who she is, she's very beautiful. And then the red cloak suited her so well, and the color red is usually a sexual color, so that just diminishes her worth as a woman and just becomes a sexual object. And a lot of people didn't know this. In the original story, when the wolf says he wants to eat her right there on the spot, it actually means he wanted to rape her because she's just an object. She's not really worth of human equality. She's just an object of sex. The next story is Donkey Skin. This is actually based on Cinderella. In this story, it starts off with the king having his wife dies, and he swears to the queen, saying that he will pledge his love and marry only if he meets a woman more beautiful and more accomplished than herself. This shows very quickly that the value of women is based on their beauty and what they actually can do. And the only person that could live up to that queen's expectation was actually his daughter Cinderella. And so to run away, she actually cloaked herself in donkey skin and a lot of dirt. And so she worked as a scullery maid, and with that covered in dirt and working as a donkey skin and working as a scullery maid, a lot of people assumed she had no social standing, she was not beautiful at all. And then as you continue reading the story, the prince finds a small, beautiful ring and assumes whoever wears that ring is just as beautiful and just as dainty. So just right there, they quickly associate a woman with an object right there. As you keep reading the story, and he finds out who Cinderella is, the king and queen did not approve because they thought she wasn't worth much because of the donkey skin and the dirt. But when they found out she was a princess of the neighboring kingdom, they accepted her. So the first wave of feminism, this is during the 19th century and the early 20th century. During this time, many women decided to sacrifice the life that they knew in order to gain the rights that they desperately deserve. So during this time, what equal rights the women have gained is right to their children, say in their wages, and owning property. One of the fairy tales that worked really well with this time period is Snow White by the Brothers Grimm. So in this story, we all know Snow White. The queen wants to be beautiful, Snow White's super beautiful, the queen wants to kill Snow White, and so on and so forth. So this is actually one of the very first fairy tales that was actually influenced by this first wave of feminism. The reason being is because Snow White actually leaves the life that she's come to know in order to escape from death. And this is a huge thing because rather than staying with what she knows, she'd rather live a life of uncertainty to live freely. And like just as the first feminists, they gave up the life that they know to get their freedom that they deserve, Snow White did the same exact thing. Now in the second wave of feminism, this is during the Civil Rights Movement and the War of Vietnam. So this is about the 1950s to the 1970s. During this time, the main focus was actually violence on rape, custody and divorce laws, and sexism in the workplace. And that's what a lot of the women during this time was fighting for. And this fairy tale, The Little Girl and the Wolf, is actually a very interesting perspective of how feminism affected fairy tales. Reason being is because, one, she's not even painted beautiful or sexual. Like, there's no mention of the color red, nothing about what she looks like. And actually, when she first encounters the wolf, she knows very quickly that he's trying to trick her. So rather than running away or asking someone for help, she actually rescues herself. She protects herself. And she does it by actually killing the wolf with the gun. Now, in the third wave of feminism, this happened very quickly after the second wave of feminism. This occurred in the 1990s, and it still occurs today. There's actually a lot of argument between there is a third wave and a fourth wave, but since there are not really big distinctions between the third and fourth wave, we still consider that we're still in the third wave today. This author, Zawacki, states that these feminists were the most abstract, where they fought for reproductive rights. These women also fought for the enlightenment of girls about challenging traditional roles of women and letting go of the narrow-mindedness to accept all women as they are. One of the greatest fairy tales that a lot of us know is Cinderella, which is the Ever After film that a lot of us know. This is actually one of the very first fairy tales affected by this final wave of feminism. In this story, Cinderella, which is Danielle in this case, she's very brave, very passionate, and a very intelligent woman. A lot of times in this story, she has to muster up a lot of courage and a lot of bravery to fight for what she thinks is right, and there's usually a lot of consequences behind it. One of the examples is that she was trying to save a good friend, but in order to do it, she had to pretend that she was this noble girl. Another time is when one of her sisters, who had no regard for other people's feelings, stole her mom's heirloom, and also stole her father's heirloom, and actually fought her for it, but did not win. And one of the consequences of that is that because Danielle had to get whipped, and she ended up losing both of those heirlooms. She embodies a lot of passion, and these passions helped influence a lot of people, and actually was trying to fight for equal rights. And with these passions, she actually was able to change the way the prince was thinking towards others. So to conclude, the ways of feminism has actually influenced the women's roles in fairy tales. These fairy tales actually had to be transformed into today's society, because if not, many people would find them offensive and interpreted wrong. And with these fairy tales, it's actually very important because fairy tales are one of the first stories children hear, and those stories actually influence a lot of kids in what they perceive the world for the rest of today. Any questions?